Shrazad Ali, former freelance writer originally from Cincinnati via Atlanta, who has been writing for over 30 years specializing in social issues affecting blacks in America. She is respected as a best-selling author, a distinguished teacher, a committed social activist, and a dynamic speaker. Sister Ali first drew media attention back in 1990 when she single-handedly wrote, produced, distributed, and launched a successful media campaign for her best-selling mega hit, The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman, which accused black women of contributing to the destruction of the black family. This controversial nonfiction text firmly established Ali as a serious writer. She followed with the sequel, The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man, in 1992, which delved into the underlying reasons that black men falter as husbands, fathers, and sons. Sister Ali re-released The Black Man's Guide and The Black Woman's Guide to try again to reach the mothers and fathers of today's fallen youth. Ali also wants to remind them that if they had listened to her 20 years ago, things would be different for African American families today. She says that it is on and playtime is over again. Woman Song, join me in welcoming Sister Shrazad Ali to the show. Welcome, Sister Ali.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so happy you invited me. I'm actually technically challenged, electronically challenged, and so for me to do this on the Internet is really new to me. Okay.
Oh, wow. I am pleased that you took the time to share with us and assist our community tonight. Let's start with giving everyone an idea of what you would say was your motivational factor for deciding that you would take on this monumental task of writing such an important work, a guide for the black man, about his woman.
Well, actually, it was because of my first book, which was actually How Not to Eat Pork or Life Without the Pig. Mm-hmm. And I was traveling. I was working at the time at Clark College in Atlanta. And I was traveling around, and I was trying to talk to our people about eating pork, how bad it was for you. It had nothing to do with religion. This was a bad meat for us because I was predicting, as that has turned out too, that by eating all of that fat and all of, those diseases and germs and stuff that were in the pig, that it was going to eventually affect our bodies. And it might not do it today, but 10, 20 years down the road it would, and it would affect our children, their weight and all of this kind of stuff. So I was really into it as I get into things, and I was taking the microscope with slides of the pig that I had gotten from farms and from CDC to show the people what the worm looked like in your body or in your brain, the kind of worm, different things. So anyway, I was going around showing all of that, and I noticed that everywhere I went, many of the brothers, the black men who were there, we didn't have the kind of integration we have today, so there was no Latinos or Asians or none in the audience. Mostly it was black. And they were not even foreign blacks. They were just the regular Negroes here in America. Right. And I noticed that they were, the brothers would say, hey, that's it for me. I'm off of that, or nah, I ain't dealing with it or whatever, or I'm going to have to change that. They were always more enthusiastic than the black women that I would talk to. Their attitude was, he going to have to eat what I cook. I've been eating it. My grandmother was eating it, and I'm not changing that. That's too much trouble. I'm not going through all of that. This is just what it is. And I would get all of those kind of responses, even from the so-called educated or intelligent black woman. And so I looked at that, and I said, now, if we're withholding the proper food from the black man, and food is what sustains life, what else are we withholding? What else do we have some kind of, idea about that is actually harming us, and we're defending it because that's just what we want to do, or we don't want to change for whatever the reasons are. And that's actually what, was the instigation for me to say, okay, maybe I need to look at this thing on another side. And that's when I started doing interviews, which would have been around like 1986. And I finally got the book out in 1990.
Well, do you believe that the information as you presented it was perceived as being ahead of its time?
Yes, ma'am, I do now. Of course, at that time I didn't. I had always been blessed to be creative and to be kind of ahead on certain things, even in writing How Not to Eat Pork, because there was not one book out about that other than the text that's in the Bible that nobody pays attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And so about not eating the pig or using it for food. And I think that had I known what I know now, of course, that's, what the hindsight is.
Right.
And we're 20 years later, we're another generation or two. Had I understood, perhaps I would have did the book, first of all, in separate books. I wouldn't have tried to put it all in one book because it was just too much. It's too emotionally draining.
Mm-hmm.
It's straight up no chaser, and it was just too much. And I tell people, don't try to read The Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman in one night.
Right.
Don't try to read it in one day. Read a little bit of it, put it down, go back the next day and read some. But because it is filled with so much truth and so much we can all identify with our mothers and our aunts and our sisters and ourselves and our daughters and everybody and our grandmothers and all of this, people read it all at once. And then they became overwhelmed, and then they, of course, were angry at me because I was the bearer of this message.
Right.
And
right.
I think it was ahead. Now, in 1990, we didn't have a lot of black books, Jolly. We didn't even have a lot of black bookstores, and it was understood if you owned a black bookstore, you were just in it for the love of books. You didn't expect to make any money.
Okay.
There was no such thing. Black people were not writing books. We just had a few out there, and we all know what they were, Most of the books we had were the older books,
Right.
We had Roots, and we had I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. We had Nataka Change. We could name them all on one hand.
That's right.
Just about, okay? We didn't have those. We didn't even have black book distributors because there was no need to have any black book distributors or wholesalers because we didn't have anywhere to put them. The white bookstores were not, unless they had been published, like I say, the people that did Roots and stuff. The white bookstores didn't carry our books. We didn't have any online, any of that stuff then. And they didn't carry our books unless they were put out by a big white publisher like Roots or Maya Angelou's books and people like that. So there was just a few around, a few books that we had around.
Mm-hmm.
And the accomplishment of being the mother of the black book explosion, I'll never get the kind of credit I should get for that because of my topic. You understand?
Yes.
So had it not been for that particular topic, they would be writing about me in all of the books instead of lying and putting other people's names in those places, But
right.
I want your audience to do this, and they can do this week, and you yourself, I'd like you all to do this.
Okay.
Go into any library, any black or white-owned bookstore, or any place else that sells books.
Okay.
College libraries, regular public libraries, especially them, or any bookstores, and check the African American and the black book sections.
Okay.
And I can guarantee you that 95% of every book that's on that shelf was written after 1990, The Black Man's Guide. We didn't have any books before then. You remember that? We had the old joke. We had a few books. But you remember the old joke, if you want to hide something from black people, put it in a book.
That's right.
Well, The Black Man's Guide proved that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to take the book to the white people for the television shows. They came to me.
Wow.
Because of the fervor that it had created in our community. It was the last time in 20 years we had all been on the same page. And white America would not allow, and is never going to allow, anybody to come along who will get the black man and the black woman talking and working out their problems. And
right.
So they had me on television. I was on there for a few years. Oh, it was all traveling, doing a lot of things, until the people stopped arguing with me and started listening. And once they started listening, creating different organizations around the country, book clubs, meeting in community centers and churches, talking about our relationships and why can't we get along and how can we work this out and what can we do, they immediately took me off the air.
Okay.
And that's how that went because, as I said, they're not going to allow anybody to help us work our problems out because it benefits the entire society financially
That's right.
And prison-wise, if we stay apart.
Right. Right.
And so that's what I've learned in the 20 years, Jolivet. I hated to get off kind of topic a little bit there, but
no,
that's
that
a
is
political point of view, but that's exactly what happened.
No, that's exactly on topic, because I wanted to talk about, you said that you were the mother of the
Black Book Explosion.
Book Explosion.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the answer to what you were saying?
Well, like Terry McMillan, that was a real big deal back in 91, 92, and 94 and so forth. But
right.
Her book had already been out when I put out The Black Man's Guide. She couldn't give it away.
Right.
And she had a big white publisher. They had it in the stores. Nobody was buying it. White women, black women, nobody. Nobody didn't want those books.
Mm-hmm.
Until The Black Man's Guide drove the black woman into every bookstore in America, no matter who owned it, looking for my book. And they were able to eventually order my book. And then they offered them her book, because it was the opposite position that my book was taking, that waiting to exhale nonsense. And that's how her book got kicked off and started. And that's equally how over that next 6 years, it took the white publishing industry about 3 years to catch up with the readership in the black community that I had unveiled. Mm-hmm. And by then, they had went into our communities, hired a lot of black editors, put them in different places in the publishing industry where we had never been, not even as secretaries, put us in there to go out into our community and write big checks to different people to write all of these different books. And so we went through, I guess, like I said, I had the market actually to myself for about 3 years. Around that fourth and fifth year, then everybody started coming out. Even, what's her name? The Iyanla Vanzant.
Uh-huh.
Okay? I remember when she first came to my office. All right, and this guy around the corner from me brought her over there, and so I had asked somebody in my office. I say, "Who is that woman that keeps sitting out there in the front?" They say she wanted to meet you. I say, "Well, okay, bring her in here. Let me get this done." You know how I am, Jolivet. Okay, I don't have a lot of patience for a lot of things, so I came in there and I met her. And so she had on a pair of flip-flops, and she had her head all with the little beads on her head and stuff. So she came in there, so we just chatted briefly. And so the next day I came back, and she was there again. So I said, "Sister, did you forget something? Oh, what you need?" I went through something like that with her. She said, "No, I just like to watch you work." Because I would be on the phone just taking my business or whatever. And so being one who was trying to get black people in business and different stuff, I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, that is so nice." So she came, for maybe about a week or something. And, of course, a couple of years later, it took her a minute, then she came out with her books, and she started with her big white publishers, and they went on and on, okay? Now, if I pass her on the street today, she would act like she don't know me. This is how they do, okay?
Right.
But all of it was because of my topic. And so the achievement, as I said, has gotten buried because of the subject matter that I chose. Because as black women in this country, we still drive any economic base in the black community because we do the majority of the spending. We not only buy our clothes and children's clothes, we buy sometimes many of our men's clothes and shoes and everything. And whatever's going in the house, we buy all of that. Even no matter where we get the money from, we do the purchasing. We have that power. And so as a result of that, they have been able to kind of write me out of the history. If I go into a library and I look at books, and they'll have a list of African-American women writers or who's who in the black writing industry and all of that. So they don't even have my name in there. They just completely have written me out of history, which is very interesting because we always talk about how white people lie about our history and leave us out. Well, black people lie about our history and leave us out, too. That's what I learned. I didn't know that at one time, But that's, how that went. And so, all of them have been successful. Now, here's the downside. The downside is that because my book was so serious and contemporary, it was today, it wasn't no black history and what we did in Egypt 5,000 years ago. Wasn't that? It was so contemporary, it was today. Let's deal with our issues right now. Let's fix this. Let's get this together, whatever.
Right.
I'm trying to see how to say that. Because it was so contemporary, the books that they brought in, they changed all of the nonfiction things over to fiction and true romance. And you know that's what they're now. For over the past 10 years is He Saw Me Loving in the Chapel. Will You Love Me Tomorrow? My baby daddy did that to me. It's all nonsense now. And so our people are still reading, but they're reading those little true romance and sex novels. Now, the last thing in America that black people need an instruction book on is sex.
Okay.
And we got all of them out there, you know, the zanes and the everything. We got every kind of ignorance and filth and low desire idea you can imagine. Those are the books we have now.
Right.
But all of that was built on the back of the Black Man's Guide. Because at one time, as I said, we didn't even have any sex books. We didn't have any paperbacks. We didn't have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But that book opened the way for that, and it demonstrated that black people do indeed read. Not only do black women read, black men read.
That's right.
Because that's who bought the Black Man's Guide to understand the black woman initially.
Okay, and let's look at that. You were saying that's a great segue into what I was going to ask you next. In the Black Man's Guide Tour lecture series, you said that the black woman was not nearly as angry as the black man who, on occasion, would attempt to physically assault you. You said that you
had security. The security was not for black women.
So why do you think that some of the black men, not all, but some of them
Because they could no longer say, I don't understand. They had to deal with it, and for that same reason that eventually when the women would come to my speaking engagements and so forth in television studios, and they would be angry or they'd be disagreeable about this and that position that I had taken or some statement I had made, the men would sit there. They wouldn't say very much all the time. But then afterward, when I would be signing books, they'd lean over and whisper, you know I'm with your sister, but you know how it is. Okay? So they would say little things like that, you know, hey, sister, you know, you're right on. All that kind. They would whisper. I'm serious. They would whisper because they could no longer pretend they didn't know what was going on, and they had to acknowledge that they were acting like a child in the house with their woman, or that they were being a little wimpy perhaps with their woman and not taking a man's position or letting the woman tell them what to do, not just being in charge as a husband or a father. Because it was easier not to tussle with us because we've been so big and bad, and we were functioning up under that illusion that white people gave us that we were the backbone of the black community. And I say all the time, there's not one nationality in America, in this country, where anybody else outside of that community points at the female and say, oh, yeah, she's the backbone of that community. That was an insult to our men, and it's always been an insult to him. Well, now, that was 20 years ago. Well, our man is completely crippled now. You know, the majority of them. Right. And so now they have given us as black women a new suggestion, and that suggestion is forget about him. He's in jail. He's on drugs. He don't have no education. He don't have no job. And so what you need to do is to look at other men, the Asians, the Latinos, the white man. Y'all need to look at some other man because your man ain't nothing.
It's done. That's right.
And that's all an insult to us. We as black women need to become more warrior-like. And we need to defend our man and our children instead of letting our little frail egos get pumped up by them telling us that we are so great and we are so grand and we can do this and we have a better education and don't get with him if he don't have a good credit score. You know, they have set the agenda of our requirements for our man. We haven't set that agenda. They have set an agenda, and now it's unless he's got a good credit score, then we can't be with him. And so, you know, we have allowed people from other nationalities, and we have speckled our communities. You can't go into the Latino community or the Asian or the Ukrainian or the European community and see a lot of speckled-colored children. Well, of course, you can a little bit more now than you could 20 years ago, but at that time, you couldn't see that because they didn't allow all of that in their community. When you come into the black community, in the same family, you may see 4 or 5 different colored children, different shades of eyes and hair and everything else because we've just been with everybody. Right. Wow. And that you can't have a good reputation to other nationalities on other continents if when they see pictures of us, they see that because everybody knows what that is. That means that the man and the woman that's the same that God gave to each other are not getting along. Right.
Well, now let's talk about the value of your work in the black community in light of our proclivity to disregard data that has not been stamped with the establishment seal of approval.
Right.
Would you say that you were faced with that type of naysaying from others in our own community?
Oh, yes. Oh, we still are. It's like now, at one time in this country, the self-made man and the self-made woman, that was something that white people always respected and glorified, and certainly black people did, because we hadn't been allowed to get to certain types of educations, and even if we did, we couldn't afford them. And so we, always just really glorified those people that opened up their own insurance company and funeral home and store and all of the traditional black businesses that we had in our communities before Martin Luther King told us it would be better to give our money to white people and do it and enjoy what they had instead of doing something for ourselves.
Right.
And so, we would fluctuate around in what other people had instead of, as I said, trying to, do something for ourselves. And that has continued to be a problem. And we're still, as I said, now we're trying to integrate on a social level more, not just in the schools or on the jobs and at the lunch counters. Now we're trying to integrate more socially because we still are dissatisfied with what we have, and we're seeking and trying to get something else.